Hello, everybody. It's Dr. Boz. We are live here on Tuesday night, and I do have a heck of a show for you. Just check my numbers right before I started it with a really solid fast of 61 blood sugar, ketones of 3.4. And I hope husband is making supper because I'm hungry. Last week, we talked about a very interesting molecule that hit the airwaves, and it caused a whirlwind of excitement and skepticism. And as we unpacked that molecule, I couldn't help but be haunted by what had happened a month earlier. This whirlwind had happened again and again. The media took hold of data that was really important, that was powerfully impactful to my internal medicine patients. And much like I got the awareness that you all cared about the molecule we talked about last week, I got a ton of information that you guys were watching these headlines and you were appropriately confused. So we are going to unpack that tonight for a topic that I think is not only relevant, but really powerfully important in the world of making decisions and what I look at when it comes to what do I tell my patients? What do I tell them with all this craziness that just flashes in the eyeballs of folks that are truly concerned about their health? We are the Dr. Boz Show. We try to make sure we bring you something valuable each Tuesday night, looking for a support system of how do you stay consistently keto. So the topics we pick are ones that most people who are trying to live a low carb, hopefully ketogenic life, you can find some inspiration at. I want to say a special thank you to the folks that showed up this morning at the Pin Chasers. That's the name of the bowling alley here in Tampa. And those Pin Chasers, oh, they teach me so much. Whenever I bring them a subject or I bring a topic, they're the ones who are my litmus test to say, is my audience going to like this? So I think they were interested in what I was talking about. Let's hope that you agree. I will look forward to answering your questions. I have a couple of folks watching your comments. So those of you watching live, type in those questions. At the end, we will kind of collate the questions that connect with the message we're talking about, or ones that seem to be overwhelmingly the ones you are asking about. Thanks for those of you checking in. Yeah, my Dr. Boz ratio is 18 today, and I can feel it. I did 2 pretty good workouts and I think 3 saunas since I started my fast. And it wasn't, it was because I needed to settle down. All right, let's get to the topic because I think it is going to take me a hot minute to get through it, and I think you're going to be very interested in it. I hope you are. The distinction between what happens in one headline versus the next, I think is going to be easy for you to see. Let's go to here. Yes. All right. So here we have some headlines that took us through last week's topic. And you can see that there were people saying, you know what, there is this new molecule around. I'm sure that it is newly discovered on why insulin resistance and the reversal of diabetes, whether words like longevity were being used. And that discussion really did capture my attention as well, mainly because of all of you that wrote in. And we unpacked that last week. You can check out last week's episode for the details on that. But I want to compare that to these headlines. So these headlines were also quite shocking. I'm going to read some of them. WebMD said, yes, fish oil supplement linked to first-time heart problems. That regular use of fish oil may increase the first-time heart disease and stroke risk. Fish oil supplements may raise your risk of heart disease and stroke if you're healthy, and fish oil supplements may raise risk of stroke, heart issues, and this study suggests. Last one is Fox News said fish oil supplements linked to greater first-time heart attack risk in study, not universally good or bad. All right. So yes, no wonder you guys were nervous and scared. That discussion, well, it did happen. This happened about 6 weeks ago, and I have the advantage of watching what has settled out since then. But at the time, I couldn't hardly get my head around it fast enough because your questions weren't they weren't casual. They were people very scared about what this headline was doing. All right, so I'm going to unpack what this study was looking at, where they got those headlines, and then, well, what's my summary? What do I think you should take away from this? It's not a Twitter storm. It would have been like a media mismatch storm, meaning what was coming out in the media and what was in this study didn't exactly match. So let's look at, and actually that's not true. They matched. We'll let you wait to the end to see where the problem lied. Okay, so regular use of fish oil supplements. So you're going to see the letters FOS throughout these next few slides, standing for fish oil supplements, and the course of cardiovascular disease in a prospective cohort study. So let me first talk about what does a prospective cohort study mean. That means that we have a large population of people that we put a stamp in time on, and we survey the people, put them into the study, and do not intervene with what's going to happen with them. So much like the Framingham Heart Study was done here in America, this UK biobank is just shy of 500,000 people that were stamped in time a couple decades ago. This study's, I just think, about 12 years ago, where they said, all right, let's look at these folks now. Let's ask them a bunch of questions. And one of the questions that they were asked on an iPad or a screen somehow is, do you take fish oil supplements? Yes or no? This sorted them into a population. This, along with hundreds, I don't know if it's thousands, but hundreds of other questions, allowed them to look at them in time. So as that population, that population was marked in time. This study was specifically looking at fish oil supplements and the clinical course for cardiovascular disease. That's actually very well defined in our literature. Atrial fibrillation, which is what all of you are writing in for, major adverse cardiovascular effects, which is abbreviated MACE, and then, the ultimate mothership, death. The design is this prospective cohort study, like I just said, stamp in time, don't intervene, watch them, and then take note of when things happen. So they did get a whopping 415,000 people, 737,000 people, and that you were allowed into this study if you were 40 but less than 70. So a 30-year age gap at the beginning, and we're going to study them over time. They were looking for these major outcomes that had cases of atrial fibrillation, all these things. But they did it by saying, did you go into a hospital? I'm kind of making it really messy here. You probably can't read that. Did you go into a hospital? That would stamp you in time in this event. Or did you show up in a death registry? Did you end up in the ultimate place for this study? So moving to this, so in this process, you could have your name stamped into their the books of this prospective study if you had a few things happen. So let's just notice, here's your baseline, 415,000. This might seem annoying to some of you, but you really can't understand where the media got this information if you don't see what they did unpack it. They just unpacked it in a way that, so the first transition, there's 24 of these different pathways. The first transition was you ended up in one of those hospitals and they had just put atrial fibrillation onto your chart. And 18,000 of them ended up there. If you had atrial fibrillation, there was a few ways you could go. You could end up with you could stay in AFib, that's fine. You could also have a progression on to death. So 22,000 of them died after being diagnosed with atrial fibrillation. Another 22,000 plus had a major adverse cardiovascular event after having atrial fibrillation. And this is very common. That AFib is a predictor of this arrhythmia of the heart, is a predictor of these, it's a heart issue that predicts the vascular events like stroke and heart failure. There's another place that you could end up, you could skip AFib. You could start out at baseline and you could go all the way over to this major adverse effect, adverse cardiovascular effect without having the diagnosis of AFib in your chart. Okay, so there's that. There's 24 of these different pathways. This one shows, here's our AFib in the center there, the same number as the last one. Our baseline's the same number. Death is the same number. But this one says there could be a stop by at the heart failure instead of major cardiovascular event, specifically saying they had heart failure. All right, so again, the prospective study is trying to put tags in all of these 400,000 charts and then make sense of it. So as folks come along, they said, well, let's take a look at the folks in this UK biobank who said the association between the cardiovascular outcomes. They reported that they use the FOS, fish oil supplements. And what are these links? So there were 15 of them. Is that right? 15 of them, yes. All right. And this adds up to 15. Math in front of everybody is always dangerous. And 9 of them said no difference. There were 5 of them that had a better outcome when they took the fish oil. And there was one that said, it was worse. Now, I think it's worth pointing out a couple of things that I have written in smaller text, but I want you to focus on that. Although the risk of going from healthy, that was the normal, to the AFib box was higher in the people with fish oil supplements versus non-fish oil supplements. Those with atrial fibrillation on the fish oil supplements were at a significantly lower risk for the major adverse cardiovascular events, MI, and death. And the absolute risk, this is something that marketers, especially in the world of statins, is the place I've seen it. Well, it was the first place that I saw it so abused. I couldn't talk about it for about a month because I was so angry that I did not appreciate they were talking about absolute risk instead of they were talking about relative risk instead of absolute risk. So the absolute risk for transitioning from healthy to atrial fibrillation in the fish oil supplement users was from 4.8 to 4.2 in the non-users. So let me say that a different way. If you ended up in the healthy to the AFib transition, so you start out with a major population of people that the people who went into the trial stamped in time. 4.8 of the people taking fish oil supplements got AFib, whereas if you weren't taking fish oil supplements, 4.2 of you got AFib. So all of these got atrial fibrillation, but the absolute risk for changing, how many more of them got AFib when taking the fish oil supplement was a 0.6% difference. This is tiny, especially when you look at what the rest of the effect was on these patients. So the biobank is also a source of information that, just like with what happened with Framingham's study, when we look at a population of people and we are now being able to say, hey, we didn't intervene, but we're noticing something. And of course, the estrogen story that we've talked about in the past is one of the places my brain goes, first of all. But when you start to, the first person that reports on one of these prospective studies, we're all very curious. We want to look at the data, and it kind of stands alone. But now you've got a good dozen years of people who've been in this study, and you've got several people who have looked at what's the difference between your analysis of this information and everybody else. So let me show you this. So I want you to now notice carefully that the author in this one is Lee, L-I, and again, very similar approach to what that author was looking at. He's looking at the habitual fish oil supplementation. So again, one of the issues with the last study was in the title, you'll notice that there is an effect of what fish oil does to people. The word effect has an actual meaning when using it in clinical studies. It means that you can measure something, you can guarantee that it's present, and that you look at the outcome. With a prospective study, nobody was measuring. This was a historical assessment until something happened, and then they were in the hospital and they could take look at several things. So this habitual fish oil supplementation with cardiovascular outcomes and all-cause mortality, evidence of the large population. So this is the same population. It came out, I think, a couple years before this. But what I want to point out is you've got Lee, which is the second one, and then Chen, the one that caused everybody to have a storm a few weeks ago. So they said for the people they were looking at, Lee had 427,000 in his cohort, whereas Chen had 415,000. I actually think that's because the difference in the years they came out. Chen came out in 2024 and Lee came out in 2020. So I think his people had died. I don't know that for sure. But what is most important about this slide is to compare the two audiences. The beauty of a prospective trial like this is it's huge. Statistics allow you to keep it randomized. And we do, table 1, which is always looking at the population, should show you that there's this random sorting of what happens to this population. So as these two analyses of the UK Biobank, there's a problem here. Let's look at the place where it's normal. It says the mean age in these, just shy of 500,000 people was 55.9 in both of them. That makes sense. How many females? Oh, about 55%. That makes sense. How many white people? 91 versus 94. Not that much different. How many had never smoked? About 56. But then there's a strange finding in the data. And again, I have the unique perspective that this has been out for 6 weeks. So there's lots of people who have analyzed what's going on here. But this is a red flag that any clinician, clinicians often don't have time to read it this acutely, but here's what should get your attention. If you look at the people who said, hey, do you have 4 servings of fruit a day? 16% in the Lee's population said yes, and 31, twice as many, said, I have 4 fruits per day. When they said, do you have 4 servings of vegetables today? 13% versus near 64.5% in the Chen said, I have 4 vegetables servings a day. Ha! And then no alcohol, 30% in the Lee group and only 4% in the Chen group. And finally, do you have fishy oil twice a week? Over half of them in the Lee group and only 17.5 in the Chen group. So one of them is wrong. Something is wrong with the data extraction coming out of the UK Biobank in one of the person's paper. You can't have this striking difference in the population of people in your study in this many categories. Like there's something wrong with someone's data that you can't have that big of a difference in 500,000 people. So this, again, I didn't find this. I just get to take it right on the shoulders of those who are saying, uh-oh, somebody made a mistake. And it got all the way to publication and it got to the headlines. So let's just look carefully at this one. This is again looking at that UK Biobank, looking at the 427,000. So this is Lee's study, the one done in 2000. And again, they're looking at the total mortality at about 10 years into this study. When they look at they look at a statistical model of 1 versus 2. Model 2 proved to be more superior. And when they look at this, there's a few things that you're going to see in several studies, but I think it's worth just pausing long enough to say, can you believe this? Can you believe this? And this is, again, this is Lee's data that says his hazard ratio is all less than 1 here. And a hazard ratio has a confidence interval plus or minus that number. So like this 0.87 is a range between 0.83 and 0.9. That's where we can be 95% confident that we are saying something truthful. And when this confidence interval doesn't cross 1, when it's less than 1, in this situation, it means that the risk for an adverse event was you were protected if you were taking the fish oil in this setting. So a 0.87, 0.84, 0.80, 0.87 again. But this 0.87, I want you to notice this goes above 1. It also did not reach a p-value of less than 0.001 like the other ones did. So the stroke mortality has something in there that you need to be careful about. That's your confidence can't be as great. But the habitual use of fish oil seems to be associated with a lower risk of all-cause mortality, cardiovascular disease mortality, and to provide a marginal benefit against these events in the general population. So this was the conclusion in 2020, and now this study in 2024 in the same population was rocking headlines because they said, oh my goodness, I mean, we'll go back to those headlines in just a minute. It's causing the problem. It's causing this. So at the risk of outing myself as an ultimate nerd, we're going to go through this chart, which is, again, looking at this audience of people in the biobank. So 17 studies in this UK biobank specifically looked at your FOS, the fish oil supplementers. And they are looking at what do we know looking at this large population and tracking them over time. And they can say, all right, well, for coronary heart disease, we know that there was a 9% and a 13% improvement in those who took fish oil versus, it's type 2 diabetes and prediabetes. There was a 9% improvement in those who had type 2 diabetes, and there was a 13% improvement in those who had prediabetes. Kidney stones, they showed, 16% improvement. You'll start to look down here. We'll come back to that red one in just a second. Liver cancer was down by 44%. Type 2 diabetes was 9%. COPD was down by 12%. Looking at total and cardiovascular mortality, you've got total down by 10% and vascular down by 15%. Cardiovascular, there's two totals in there. Oh, total was this one. This one was for dementia. I'm sorry. This total was down by 17% and the cardiovascular down by 19%. The details aren't as important as for you to see. The number that are highlighted in green are different studies of this 400,000 plus population. 430,000, I think, is where they started. Population of people that said we can say with confidence that walking with them over the last decade said if they were fish oil supplementers, if they went to their survey and checked that they took fish oil supplementation, this was less likely to be happening in them. Okay, so the part that I want you to pause and notice, I'm being really specific about some of the words, at least I'm trying. When I go back and listen on replay, sometimes I think, I wasn't very specific about the words I used. It is a live show, so be forgiving. That when you look at that study, the parts that are just striking are that you're looking at real live human beings living today in the time that we live in recent decades. So stress and population and pollution and, what are the commercials on television? They're influencing these people all the same. And as you watch them age, when they end up in that place of the hospital or death, where they had the ability to study, well, what really did they die from? What was their numbers? We can separate them over time. And as this huge UK biobank continues to collect information, we get smarter, better, higher quality of information, as long as nobody starts fudging on the numbers. This is in striking contrast to what we talked about last week, where we're looking at no prospective human trials that we know of, that we were looking at cells in a petri dish and how they behaved to a biochemist, to a cell physiologist studying them, that we had some mouse data. This is human data. This is elevated. It's not just in vivo in mammals. It is it doesn't have to be just in mammals to be vivo, but there's mosquitoes or other things. But it is it's our people, meaning same time, same living place. This is not that long ago that it started. And now I want you to notice what I'm going to do next in comparison. And that is when you're trying to say, what do the headlines really mean? this is what physicians across the globe should be doing, and I don't pretend to be perfect at this, this is hard to do, is they would take notice between, is it a prospective study versus did we really measure an outcome inside patients? We can do that with omega-3 supplementation. So here's a quick just flash. This guy is from Kansas City. O'Keefe studies lots of things, but this came out in 2024, Mayo Clinic Proceedings, and he's looking at the association of plasma DHA levels and the quintile. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 groups of the patients. And if you had the lowest quintile, that's what one was, and we're looking at how quickly did you die. So you don't want that bar to be very high. All-cause mortality is what you're looking at here. So the lowest quintile for omega-3 when they measured it in those patients was the highest mortality. And as you separated them out into 5 groups, that there is this trend towards, oopsie daisy, there is this trend toward the lowest death rate when they had the highest amount of omega-3 found in their bodies. So you look at cardiovascular mortality, and again, as you got to the highest amount of omega-3s in their test, in their actual being, they were better protected. They had less cardiovascular death. They ended up in the morgue less. When it came to cancer, it was less. All other things they were studying, less. And again, this is even a higher quality of data collection than somebody who is looking at a prospective study, because those people were asked, do you take fish oil? Now, I want to believe in humanity that the people who said they didn't take fish oil, they didn't take fish oil. But it is not a measurement of fish oil. So again, here we get coronary heart disease, type 2 diabetes. We are looking at in vivo. So this is going to take even a wider swath of folks. This is not just in human studies, but in vivo. And we're looking at the fatty acid levels. And this is a fatty acid group that measures, that the FORCE stands for a people researching team that was looking at how do we measure fatty acid effects on health. I can't remember what FORCE stands for. I'm sorry. So looking at, again, what are the favorable places where the outcomes continue to show what I would want my patients, what I wanted to quickly shove down I wanted to take the information from, well, I had to put more in my brain in order to answer all those questions and then be able to answer the questions for my patients that, look, type 2 diabetes, it was better. All-cause mortality, cardiovascular mortality, cancer mortality, those are the studies I just went through. Atrial fibrillation was favorable. Strokes, ischemic stroke, hemorrhagic stroke where it caused a bleed. And I do hope somebody asks a question in the chat about taking omega-3s and bruising. Chronic kidney disease, again, favorable. Another thing that when you're studying, I can't help but point this out, that when people bring up omega-3s, heart disease, AFib now comes up in every conversation, but it's the dementia that I always kept a close eye on this for as well. Looking at this 2003 paper, looked at, again, the hazard ratio for the quartile. The higher, so this is quartile 1, 2, or quintile, sorry. 4 and 5. So those 5 groups were how high was their omega-3 inside their reports, and the higher their omega-3, their less mortality. That's a good thing. Finally, this is the last one, I promise. You are looking at in 2003. This again, taking all these studies and saying, well, in the end, when it crosses 1, our confidence interval is blunted. But if you took all of this data and you compiled it together, and again, much smarter people than me, the pooled relative risk for incidental atrial fibrillation, meaning going from healthy people to creating AFib, based on circulating EPA and DHA levels. Again, the highest quality of evidence. Is it in this person? It's not like what what I think is, one of the biggest crimes when studying a couple of supplements, like vitamin D studies, really irritate me. When those vitamin D studies come out, they are saying the people with vitamin D and without vitamin D, or they say they take vitamin D, or they were supplementing with vitamin D. But vitamin D is weird. Vitamin D is highly controlled by insulin. And if you're very insulin resistant, getting those vitamin D levels to be at a healthy level does not always correlate with what you're swallowing. Ask me how I know. Not just for me, but for patients again and again and again. Why can't I get my vitamin D up? So they do these studies on vitamin D, and out comes this headline that says vitamin D supplementation doesn't make a difference. And I'm like, well, if you're insulin resistant, that's very true. I can show you clinical evidence. But when you measure what was their vitamin D at the beginning, what was their vitamin D at the end, and you raise that, a completely different study evolves out of that data. So this data that they're looking at was, what is the omega-3 in these people? How high, divide them into 5 quartiles of the population. And the higher it was, the less these problems happened. That is incredibly valuable data for me to be able to say to a patient, do I think you're going to die of a heart attack? Well, you've got lots of risk factors for a heart attack. Do I think the omega-3 is making it worse? And we will get to that in just a second. All right, so I want to take a brief second before I give you the punchline of what do I think you should do about this. What's the culmination of my point? And I do believe I got there rather quickly compared to what I was afraid I'd do. Let me go over to my website here. Again, once during our program, I try to make sure bozmd.com is where you find a couple of things that really do support this channel. I try to do as much free for you as I possibly can, but this is where I do say, praise God, we have a business model that is working and keeps all of the payroll paid. But I want to show you a couple things. On the Dr. Boz favorites page, there is this, which is the Keto Orlando Summit. So on the second row, if you click on that, you will land over on this page. This week, I get to do really the second major event of my year for 2024. I did keep the number of events down this year because I had a kid graduating from high school. As I look at this, though, it has been one of my more challenging, but really rewarding topics to review. And I am super excited to be able to share that with the ladies who run the Keto Orlando Summit. I will just put in a plug for them. They are 2 folks that are really do this as a volunteer at the beginning. And now they've tried to, section off their job to give them their time off to come to Orlando, put on this summit. And if you've ever been to one of these, they don't make a lot of money, but they really do improve the lives of people. And this summit it's just one of my favorite. The 2 gals that run it are so genuine, and they are just as hungry as all of you for an improved health profile. I feel honored to be asked back again. And I would just want to show my support by saying, if you head over and click on there and watch to be able to watch online or be able to have the amazing privilege to be there in person, I will be there not only for the Thursday night event, but also for Friday afternoon and all the way through Saturday until I speak. And I'm just thankful to be part of it. Please know that their support or their event is something I really do support, and you can still buy tickets. So we'll see you there. If you're coming, bring your questions. In other news, I think that's all I wanted to do for highlights this week. I do want to say thank you for all of you that did tune in the last couple of weeks and buy our courses. It really, again, is how we keep doing what we do every week. All right, so let's get back to our final couple of slides here about what do I want to do? What do I think you should do with this? Well, first of all, if I could go back, and I want to say thank you, Bill Harris, for helping me kind of not only find these headlines, but how, choosing your words very precisely is not an accident. When you do that, you as a mediator, you as an influencer, even a YouTuber, there's a difference between making a sensational clickbaity headline and one that's not truthful. So let's just look at this. If you looked at the fish oil supplement, And you said linked to first time. Now, what first time means in that, now that you've watched that study, is from healthy to atrial fib. That's what first time means. And then they said heart problems. So I think I would be careful with the word heart problems. I wouldn't have used that word. Regular fish oil supplements may increase first time heart disease. Actually, that should be a red one. That is naughty. You should not be saying heart disease. They also moved stroke, and I forgot to point this out on the slide. If you go back to that and rewind it, you'll see that stroke was not statistically significant. They should not have used that word in the headline. They should not have used that word in the summary. And the other part that I think I'll get to make here in a second. So anyway, this headline definitely should not have used the word heart disease. That has a very specific meaning. And that's not what the headline said. So these people took the liberty of exploiting this. Now, the fish oil supplements may raise your risk of, again, heart disease, stroke, if you're healthy. They're saying from healthy to stroke, what was statistically significant? And the stroke was not statistic. There might be a trend, but it's not, you cannot be confident in what you're saying yet. You're getting the cart ahead of the horse, and you're scaring the tar out of my patients. Fish oil supplements may raise risk of stroke, heart issues. I mean, that actually would be atrial fibrillation. You could leave that in your headline. And then, studies suggest fish oil supplements linked to greater first-time heart attack. No way. You cannot say that. It did not increase the heart attack. That's absolutely a blatant lie, and not universally good or bad. I mean, they're hedging there. The point of pointing out these headlines was the mistakes they made where they were not precise in the words that they were using. And you can scare my patients when you're telling them the truth. When not only did this study not mention the previous study by Lee that clearly had a different outcome. When you do a study, especially a prospective study where you don't have the measurements inside the patients, you just have their outcomes to report from, it is your responsibility to compare that data to what the other folks have said that came before you. And when you completely ignore, didn't even mention the paper one time, that is unethical. That is naughty. That is super naughty, because you scared the tar out of me. I read the headline too and said, oh my God, what? Really? So the next question that ever comes up every time I talk about this is, all right, doc. So there's studies like we talked about last week, which I'm very curious about. I want to keep my ear to the rail and hear how that evolves. But I think we're going to be waiting a while for the kind of data that would really help us be super confident in what we are trying to say. But it doesn't make me shy away and poo-poo it. It just says, be careful how you conclude it. When it comes to fish oil, especially EPA, DHA, you get away from the word fish oil. There are so many studies that are human studies that measure the actual level of the fish oil in the body of the person you're trying to take an assessment of, that it is sinful, that you do not, that the conclusion was, stop it, you're giving everybody heart failure. You're giving everybody atrial fibrillation. That's not what the study said. And the risk of that was measured at 0.6 increase, not the 10% increase. On one place, I don't know how they got to 16% increase, but they put that in their headline. And it was not mentioning one of the other things that got better, all these other places that you saw improvement, that you saw less of, that even if they got atrial fibrillation, their chances of death were better, their chances of a stroke was less. So what happens after I say this is people say, well, what kind of fish oil should I buy? And therein lies where we do lose the audience. People say, oh, it's so complicated. I don't want to, oh, there's so many choices. Oh, it's so many options. In fact, I can write a prescription for you to have fish oil that the FDA has approved. And you're like, okay, it's the same fish oil. If you, as long as you're measuring the right units, you don't need to come to me for a prescription. You can find pretty awesome fish oil out there. And the technology behind fish oil has actually really changed recently. So I'm going to show you the 3 forms that I am excited to share that you can get fish oil by doing, omega-3 fish is what we're talking about. EPA, DHA is what we need to measure. The first one that we talk about is the regular form. And that means you went to the shelf in Costco or wherever and you said fish oil. And if you go back about 10 years when I first started looking into fish oil, or, really had to unpack it, if you had a 30% of your supplement, if 30% of what was in 1,000 milligram fish oil, so that'd be 300 milligrams was EPA, DHA, that was really the best in class at the time. But and what that means is, I like to really, for those science geeks, it is the ethyl ester that you're buying. It's a fatty acid that can be modified into the ethyl group. You can find it in a lot of different ways, but the best in class 10 years ago was 30%. Since then, there's a couple things that came to market, like krill oil. It's your phospholipid form of it. So it's the fish eggs or the fish oil. And we do think that has a better bioavailability. They were able to absorb more, but the amount of EPA and DHA in there was not as sexy as we thought it would be. Which brings us to the third one. And this really has taken the world by storm. In fact, it's been something where each time I've gone to think, all right, I'm going to let my family be my experiment again. Many of you know that I will not put something on the market. I don't have a fish oil on the market, don't worry. But I've thought about it. And so every time I go to put a fish oil, I research it and I spend all this time and I find a couple of companies that are making what I think is pretty good product. And then I have husband take them and he burps up fish, or, it's like worse than sardines. He just burps up the fish oil taste forever and ever. So like 2 months in, he may have 30% DHA in this really high expensive, krill or the roe option. But when you continue to burp up the fish oil, it has poor sustainability, like the patient quit taking it until this new product came on the market. So it is called the triglyceride form of it, and it is up to 90%. I don't know if you get 90% EPA, DHA, and it's really cool what they do to it. So when you look at that free fatty acid, you notice the regular fish oil was kind of free floating fatty acid, and it does make it a little harder to absorb, right? So it also is what makes you burp it up. It stays in the gut and it's causing this little distress. And you're right that people do upregulate those receptors and they do a much better job, but there's something about fish oil supplements that months into this, you're still burping it up. It's just gross. But when you do the triglyceride form, which means, okay, I'm going to use my hand as a way this is triglyceride. It's got 3 fatty acids on it and it has a glycerol backbone. And what the scientists can do is they can put the omega-3s, the APA, DHA as two of the arms. I don't think all 3 of them are omega-3s. But because it's in triglyceride form, your body absorbs almost all of it. Like the quickness at how fast you can raise that that number of what is your how much DHA, EPA, what's your omega-3 in your body, and how quickly you can impact that with a triglyceride form of the fish oil of omega-3 it's impressive. It is much like the molecule we talked about last week. There is a scientist involved in making it easier to absorb, easier to resource, not killing whales or whatever they used to do for it. They don't kill whales for that, but they usually get it out of algae or some form of algae. But this triglyceride form is really you are the benefit of several. Looking at technology getting so good that you can almost mandate the replication of how much DEA and EPA and DHA is in each. And so I did reach out to my favorite nerd. I love him, Dr. Bill Harris, who is I was reading some of his bio, top 2 scientists, top 2% of scientists alive today is Bill Harris because of his work. And this is one of the brands that not only is he part of a team that studies your omega-3, I've had mine studied in the last year and looked at, you prick your finger, going back to our website over here, when you go to Dr. Boz favorites, you can scroll down and find, or actually right here, have your omega-3 tested by clicking on that. Again, use promo code Dr. Boz. And what you can do is measure your own. This is the punchline that I was getting to, is that when people say, boy, is that, new drug on the market going to do everything it says? I don't know. Is that drug on the market going to do, or is omega-3 going to cause me atrial fibrillation? I don't know. How well what is your omega-3? Use the data you have. And I do think this is the trend that medicine is going in, that when people, this prospective trial is the foundation of what many of the recommendations and guidelines that I tell patients about is for. But I think the people watching this now, are biohackers. You want to know what's going on in your system. And I would contend, don't ask me. Don't trust that UK Biobank, which, okay, so they live in about the same, latitude as us. Oh, they've got a similar socioeconomic background to us, but they're a UK Biobank. What's different about them? I don't know. And even if it is different about that, they said, well, those were supplementers that took fish oil. Was it krill oil? How often? Once a week? Don't guess. Measure your omega-3. Take a supplement if you want to. You can try to do this with sardines. I have a few people that are amazing and have the best numbers ever, because it's very bioavailable if you eat the fish, but you got to eat a lot of fish to do that. And in fact, at the pin tracers this morning, I had a couple of people say, I just eat a lot of fish. And I would say, prove it, check your number, and show me that your omega-3 percentage is not 4%, which is where mine has been, but it's better now. It's not, I don't know if it's quite 8, but I'm trying. But if my husband's is great, because I had him take this dang supplement that really does absorb well. It's in that triglyceride form. The part that I really want you to pay attention to is that if you're looking for a good supplement and it doesn't say triglyceride form, pause. This really is the key to somebody having the benefit of, what do I recommend for fish oil? When I look, I thought I put that, oh, no, I'm not going to leave that. I thought I put the other thing on there, but I didn't. I was trying to get to, what amount. And again, I can tell you to take 2 grams of fish oil, but if you're burping it up and you're pooping it out, it didn't matter. I can tell people that if you have a higher omega-3, your risk of heart disease, even if you've got calcified coronary arteries, your brain and your heart are better as long as that fish oil is in the skin lining of your cells. And that's what that omega-3 does. And I love this company. There's 2 of their tests that I co-brand, meaning I put the Dr. Boz name on it, and that's the vitamin D and the A1C. But it is their omega-3. I just can't sell it to you at a competitive price and still not go broke. So I just send you to them because it is about $100 to check it. But don't guess. It's so much better for you to say what's going on in your system, and is the thing you're eating improving that. So without being too eager about what I think that those comparisons are from last week to this week, that when people have a craziness in the headlines, or whether it's positive or negative, I think it's our job as clinicians and as scientists to back up and say, okay, what is the quality of the data? What is the collaboration of the data? Is there any error that's been happening in the publication that came out? Like that statistical analysis made the hairs on the back of my neck rise, because I would have never noticed that the biobank was reported this way in one study and 4 years later was strikingly different. There's something wrong with the data. And again, people smarter than me pointed that out. But the point is, I was listening to the right people, that having that resource of, you're going to be told to take a lot of supplements. I don't think any of them come to the quality of information that says nobody's going to care about you as much as you do, especially in the biohacking world of today. Measure the stinking thing. If you're worried about AFib, if you have AFib and you're saying, well, I kind of stopped my fish oil because I have AFib. First of all, that wasn't you. These were people who didn't have AFib, who got AFib, that had the attention. If you had AFib, the fish oil improved every one of the metrics that you should care about, keeping you out of the morgue. And it's in that disservice that the headlines did. And I know there are many of my very fragile AFib patients that, I stopped it. And I'm like, oh, you can't satisfy that information quick enough and fast enough to help protect them. And I'm the first to say, I wish it was easier to get to the summary point of, should I take it? Should I not? Speaking of which, let's get over to your questions. My favorite part of this, I'm actually prepared to, maybe I'm not, that I don't have a glucose in front of me. Oh, but I have a glucose. Oh, I don't have a ketone in front of me. Oh, yes, I do. Sorry. All right. So we're going to get to your questions for those that have written in. Betty starts out the night with a question saying, are there any potential blood thinning issues that may arise from taking fish oil? Can taking fish oil make your blood too thin? Oh, Betty, you should get a prize, because that's the question I was really hoping somebody would ask. So this is what I hear from patients all the time. Okay, the first thing I hear about is the burping, but the second thing I hear about is, Doc, I'm bruising. And it has been studied. It has been studied very well in the world of not just people with AFib, but anybody taking fish oil, because you'll hear the sense of bruising that is higher, especially in the folks. Now, this is my clinical observation. I just find they've been around the sun more times than not. So they're 50 plus, and they have a fragility to them. There is a health issue that, they're on fish oil trying to prevent something, but that bruising is real. Here's what I can tell you with confidence is it's been studied with high accuracy in humans taking the supplements, measuring the supplements, and then so the highest quality data that said there was no serious bleeding issues or life-threatening bleed. I think the words they used, I should be very precise with my words. There was no significant bleeding issues associated with the consumption of the fish oils. So it doesn't mean you didn't bruise. It meant that, yep, the bruising was there, but that did not link you to that increased I checked my numbers at the beginning and I'm checking my numbers at the end, but I didn't have a single drink of my supplement. Okay, so I'll keep asking questions, but I'm still going to check my numbers. All right, Terry writes in. So the answer to your question, Betty, is you will bruise. Well, bruising is not uncommon, but it did not increase any life-threatening bleeding issues. Terry, how do you assure a good quality? We hear often about it becoming rancid. That exact same question came up this morning at the Pin Chasers. And I said, that the rancid part is, difficult with any fat. It's why last week when I was talking that their product is in a powder, I'm enamored. I'm like, wow, that is so cool. But this fat of fish oil does go rancid, and then it's got an peroxidized or oxidated. So my blood sugar's 67. So the fish oil. Oh wait, it's my only ketone meter, and it died. I don't think I'm gonna get to check my ketones. My strips are out. Sorry, I can't measure it. Bugger. Anyway, back to Terry's question of you can smell it when it's rancid, but when you watch the technology that has improved recently, it is that triglyceride form. I used to say when the triglyceride form just came out, I used to tell people you're going to want to go for the expensive one. It costs more to have the chemist put those chains of fat on that glycerol molecule and then put it back in form so your body can use it. But krill oil and that roe fish oil, they're about as expensive as the triglyceride form. So just be really careful that you look for that word triglyceride form on it. If they have triglyceride form, they are bragging about it. At first they just didn't have as many studies out, but they are very clear this is the superior product. And by golly, I can keep my husband taking it because it doesn't taste like, it doesn't have him burp up. The other reason that I put Parasol on there is it's not an accident that the people that I learn about fatty acids, fatty oxidation, omega-3s, that my teachers, my advisors, they run the studies for thousands of companies, thousands of supplements. And the one that they put out, first of all, I think they have a heck of a good price on it. And it's the good one. It's the really good one. And their whole reputation depends on you taking your omega-3 and you rising it. There's a whole bunch of people out there that, they offer you a supplement, but they don't give you any solid biohacking to say, what is it before and what is it after? And they have all kinds of little kits that you can do the experiment. The reason, if you've ever tried to buy the vitamin D from me, is if I only had one test in my kit, it just barely breaks even for not losing me money. But if I put 2 in there, if you return it, well, I won't break even for about 10 more sales. But so it's just too small of margins. But I got the idea from when I saw their kits that if you're trying to get your husband to take fish oil, well, you both should check it, send it in, take the supplement, and then check it again. And I've done this with my family. I always lose because I'm terrible about taking the supplements. All right, Sue Monroe, yay, from Iowa. So did she just say omega-3 supplements can cause bruising? Yes, they can. I take omega-3 supplements and krill oil. I am constantly finding bruising on my arms and legs. I honestly have no idea how I got it. Yeah, totally. In Sue, it's probably from your supplement of fish oil. I would absolutely ask you to finish up the one you're taking. It's not worth throwing away, but to move towards a triglyceride-based fish oil. And unlike the supplement we taught last week where I would be hopeful of what it causes, I can be confident of what that fish oil, especially when you push that number up into above 8% or above for your omega-3 is your goal. And so if you're anywhere, south of that on the one you're taking, it's hard to absorb it. Actually, if you're getting bruising, that the fish oil is doing its job. That's part of what it's going to do is it affects that cell wall. So you can find fragility in some of the blood vessels, but it was not a significant shift of, it was not a significant bleeding issue, excuse me. Last question by Miss Deb, which is near and dear to my heart. If you watched my videos over the summer, you know that I did spend time in Alaska. I totally teased my husband that next summer I want to live in Alaska for a couple months. Is Alaskan wild salmon oil the same as other fish oil? Well, I must say that it is not. It's a fish oil. And they are marketing one of the best places to go catch salmon. But it's the same. You're going to want to look at the packaging and look for the DHA, EPA, and you want to get close to, at least a gram a day. But you'll notice that the one that was on that's in the show notes, that'll be in the Dr. Boz favorites. You can put in a promo code Dr. Boz, and it's not so much that you do get a discount about 10%, but what I want them to know is that I'm sending them business. I love this company. They're very good scientists. They are wholesome Midwest company, and from my favorite state of, okay, I live in Florida, but I don't know, it's 50 years in South Dakota. I'm still going to say my favorite state's South Dakota. So I would be eating the rest of that salmon oil, Alaskan salmon oil, Miss Deb, and calling it good. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in. I will see you next week. I have a couple of really fun interviews that I get to have this week, ones I've been praying for. I wish I could show you my ketones, but that was the last ketone strip in front of me, so I'd have to run down the hall. See you at the Orlando Summit this weekend. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll see you next week.